Mona Lisa, oh, Mona Lisa, there's such temptation and aggravation and guile in your little smile, sang Johnny as he put the record on the gramophone. Yes, I saw it in Murdoch's and I got it at once, for you, Janet. Janet smiled painstakingly. Martin Caddis uttered a loud laugh. He had had just a little too much of Johnny's impeccable port. You call her Mona Lisa, Aysgarth? Yes, it's her smile. It's very disturbing. I never know whether she's laughing with me or at me. He set the needle on the record. How absurd you are, Johnny, Lina laughed. Janet continued to smile painstakingly. Dance with me, Janet. Johnny's twinkling eyes taunted her. No, thank you, Johnny. I never dance so soon after dinner. Not even with me? Not even with you. Lina made a note to tell Johnny that he really must not tease Janet in public. He had been doing it all the evening. Janet did not understand teasing. She went to Janet's rescue. Janet, have you heard about Martin's novel? He's found a publisher for it. Have you really, Martin? Johnny turned to the Newshams, who were sitting together a little aloofly on the couch. Bring your one-stringer, Harry? Yes, Harry Newsham said, not without eagerness. It's in the hall. Good, said Johnny very heartily. We must have it in soon. He would bring it, Frida Newsham interjected. I told him nobody would want to be bored with it, but he insisted. I should hope so, Johnny replied perfunctorily. What did you think of the run last Tuesday, Harry? A corker, wasn't it? Johnny was able to hunt now. Frida Newsham somewhat elaborately turned her shoulder towards him and yawned. By the open window, Lina, Janet, and Martin were discussing Martin's novel. Martin himself, a short young man with lots of fair hair, always untidy, and a very large head, who stammered when he was excited, was rapidly approaching the stammering stage. His own novel always excited Martin tremendously. He had first told Lina the story of it 5 years ago. On hearing that she was the sister-in-law of Cecil, he had told it to her again. He continued to tell it to her at intervals until he began to write it. Then he brought it to her, chapter by chapter. Lina had found it far too long-winded and very dull. She had not told Martin so. Martin, thus established as Lina's literary protégé, came to Delfield a great deal. Lina had encouraged him at first. It flattered her to have a young man hanging on her criticisms and accepting her judgment as final, to say nothing of acting as Maecenas to the young White Hope. Martin would argue fiercely with Janet when, as not seldom happened, she disagreed with Lina. Johnny, whom Martin frankly bored, laughed at her, called Martin the caddis worm, and made no objections on finding him so often deep in earnest discussion with Lina on higher things when he came back from work. A year or more ago, through Lina's intercession with Cecil, Martin had been offered quite a good post on one of the more serious weeklies, and since then Lina had not seen so much of him. She had not been unthankful. Stammering with excitement, Martin explained to Janet the alterations he had made since she last read the manuscript. Lina, of course, had been kept informed of them by letter. Her attention wandering, she turned to find that Frida had joined them. On the couch, Johnny and Harry were still talking hunting shop. Frida listened for a few moments with an expression of intelligent concentration. Then, finding that the young author continued to confine himself to Janet, let the expression slip and turned to Lina. "Let's walk around the garden, shall we? It's quite warm for September. I don't seem to have seen you for ages. I've been longing for a real gossip again." They edged past the other two out through the window. Frida linked her arm through Lina's and exclaimed loudly at the gladioli, still obstinately resisting autumn and dimly to be seen, standing at attention like a party-coloured platoon in the darkening twilight. But Frida's gladioli, it immediately transpired, were taller, stronger, and less ready to fade. "Are they really?" said Lina. The two women paced, gleaming wraiths to Janet and Martin, round the neat gravel paths. "What on earth," said Frida abruptly, "is the matter with Johnny this evening?" "Johnny?" Lina echoed, surprised. "Nothing, so far as I know. Why?" "He's been positively rude to me all the evening." "Has he? I'm awfully sorry, Frida. Are you sure? I never noticed." "No, my dear, you wouldn't." There was a really vicious edge to Frida's voice. Lina wondered what on earth was the matter with her, not with Johnny. Johnny had not been rude to her in the least. He had not taken very much notice of her. Perhaps that was the trouble. It was Frida's enormous vanity. "I'm getting sick of this place. Thank goodness I'm going up to town the day after tomorrow for a week." "Are you?" Lina said enviously. There was no reason why Lina should not go up to town for a week too if she wanted, but somehow she never did. At the back of her mind, though she refused to recognize it, was the feeling of wardership. Johnny was quite all right now, of course, but still, better not leave him. "Yes, Charlie Bowes. I've told you about him, haven't I? Is going to be up, and wanted me to join him." "Oh, yes." Lina accepted this surprising statement quite calmly. Frida had half a dozen men friends whom she favoured with her society in London, in return for theatres, dinners, dances, and attention. She stayed at one hotel, and her escort of the period at another. Frida was very insistent that everything was quite all right. Besides, Harry knew all about it and didn't mind in the least. Lina, who considered the arrangement extremely undignified, to put it at its mildest, thought that probably Harry had no option. "I'm looking forward to it. I like Charlie. He's tremendously fond of me, of course. Yes, it'll be quite nice to get a little attention for a change." "Frida, how absurd you are. Nobody could be more attentive than Harry. He's positively maudlin for a husband." "I wasn't thinking of Harry." Good heavens, Lina thought. Was she thinking of Johnny? Surely she can't be falling in love with Johnny after all this time. If so, she's got a poor chance. She smiled into the growing darkness. A very poor chance. Johnny had always said that he never saw Frida without wanting to smack her hard. He had even implored Harry, in Frida's presence, to smack his wife hard and often. Johnny did not like Frida. That was a funny thing about the country, Lina reflected idly. Joyce, in London, only had for friends people she liked. In the country one does not necessarily like one's friends at all. They are one's friends because they are there. And though, of course, one does not detest them, one rarely likes them. However, this arrangement does provide something to talk about, and heaven knows, in the country that is needed badly enough. Out of this evening's gathering, for instance, only she and Janet, and perhaps she and Martin Caddis, really liked one another. The rest were either indifferent or friendly on the surface, and never missing a chance of saying something nasty in the other's absence, like Frida and Janet, and yet one asked them all to dinner as a matter of course. Frida and Janet, and now, it seemed, Frida and Johnny. How absurd. How absurd, said Lina. What's absurd now? Why, you're saying that Johnny had been rude to you this evening. Lina realized that, unthinkingly, she had spoken a rather tactless thought aloud, but, committed, still more tactlessly, amplified it. I assure you, it wasn't absurd in the least. Frida was beginning to breathe quickly. She's really annoyed, thought Lina. Johnny's never rude to anyone, except intentionally. Thank you, then it was intentional. But, my dear Frida, there wasn't any rudeness. Lina was getting irritated herself. The woman really was a fool. No? Frida was silent for a moment. Then I suppose if he wasn't rude to me, he was rude to Janet. What do you mean? I simply don't understand you. No, I can quite believe that. Well, all I'll say is that I was under the impression that Janet and Johnny didn't like each other any too much. Nor they do. At least, Janet doesn't like Johnny. I'm sure I can't imagine why. And yet Johnny calls her Mona Lisa and buys gramophone records for her. Lina paused for a moment to control her temper. Frida, she said coldly, don't you think you're making rather an idiot of yourself? Thank you, Frida returned angrily. That comes pretty well from you. What do you mean? Oh, nothing. They walked a dozen yards in silence. I saw your maid, Ella, the other day, Frida said more calmly. You remember her? The one you had here first? Oh, yes. Did you? Lina recognized the olive branch and accepted it instantly. Her tempers were often matters of seconds only. How's she getting on? She's married. I believe she married soon after leaving you. Why don't you go over and see her? She lives at Pensworthy. Her husband's got a grocer's shop there. Pensworthy was a small town, perhaps 20 miles away. I might call in one day, when we're going through in the car, Lina said without enthusiasm. Ella was connected in her mind with an unpleasant period. She had no wish to see her again. She was a pretty girl, wasn't she? Yes, quite. She's got a little boy now, about 5 years old. Has she? Lina wondered why Frida should be apparently so interested in the almost forgotten Ella and her new appurtenances. If I were you, said Frida quite passionately, I should go over and see her, Lina. The Aysgarths spent Christmas that year, as usual, at Lina's old home. Joyce and Cecil were there too, with the children. Mrs. McLaidlaw was getting rather feeble now, and everyone was as kind to her as possible. She still lived at Abbot Monkford, but since the General's death and the inheritance which had passed to his daughters, there was barely enough money to keep the place up, and half the house was closed. Mrs. McLaidlaw had a little money of her own, strictly tied up, of course, as women's money was when she had married, which would pass to her own side of the family when she died. It would have been rather a melancholy little gathering, but for Johnny. He kept everyone's spirits up. Joyce's children, Robert and Armorel, adored him, and he seemed scarcely less fond of them. They never left his side except when forced, and then they had to be prized away. While they were there, Johnny asked Lina, in his insinuating way, to raise his allowance. "But why, darling?" Lina asked. "It isn't as if you'd got any expenses. You spent it all on yourself. Why do you want more?" It was Christmas night, and they were in bed, comfortably full of turkey and plum pudding and goodwill. "I have got expenses, monkey face," Johnny said, stroking her hand. "I keep the car up and all that. Silly little tiny soft hand you've got, haven't you? I wonder you can ever do anything with it at all. It's so small." "What does the car cost you?" "To run? Oh, I suppose about 300 a year, with everything." 300? Lina repeated, astonished. "Quite that. Probably a bit more." "But that's all it cost new." "Cars are devilish expensive things," opined Johnny. "And I've got lots of other expenses, of course." "What?" "Well, it costs me a good bit, being on the county council. I could chuck that, though, if we're hard up." "No, of course you mustn't, darling. You know I like you to be on the county council, but still, 500, just for yourself." Johnny rubbed his nose against her ear. "It cost me half that to hunt. Don't be a mean little monkey face. You can afford it." "Darling." Lina turned her head and kissed him. "But I'm not so sure that I can. How much do you want?" "I can't do on much less than 1,000, said Johnny cheerfully. "Johnny!" Lina withdrew from him sharply. "You're mad." "Too much," said Johnny in a resigned voice. "I should think it is too much. You don't understand what that house costs, my lad." "Well, make it 750. I can always chuck hunting, if you're so keen for me to stop on the council." "But, darling, I don't want you to chuck hunting." Lina softened at once before Johnny's disappointment. "Must. You don't understand what hunting costs, my girl." Johnny, who disliked being called my lad, always retorted with my girl. Then Lina would remember he disliked it and feel penitent. "Well, we can't decide now. We'll go into the figures when we get home, and I'll see what can be done." Lina hated going into figures, but she could not quite believe that running a car, being on the county council, and hunting could cost 1,000 a year and leave nothing over for cigarettes. In the end, Lina took over the car, which cost her just £40 a year, and Johnny got 600. After all, she could afford it. She spent very little on herself, and she wanted Johnny to be happy. Lina stared at the cheque. Then she put it down on her breakfast tray and read the letter again. The Southern Counties Bank Limited, Culhampton, Dorset. Mrs. J. H.C. Aysgarth, Delfield, Up Cottery. Dear Madam, we enclose the cheque which was presented yesterday for payment by Mr. J. H.C. Aysgarth for verification of your signature, which appears to us to differ from your normal signature. We would also call your attention to the fact that there are not sufficient funds in your current account at the moment to meet so large a sum. Yours faithfully, the Southern Counties Bank Limited. The cheque was for £500. Johnny had taken to forgery. Lina did not see him all day. She realized that he would have known that the bank would communicate with her, and he had been afraid to face her. He had probably tried to intercept the letter by the first post, not expecting that the bank would send it over by a special messenger. When there was no letter, he must have thought they would telephone. He had run away. The special messenger meant that the bank knew. The bank knew that Johnny was a forger. Lina had done her best. She had written to the bank that the signature was quite in order, the difference being due to the fact that she had sprained her thumb, but that as there were not sufficient funds to meet the cheque, she was cancelling it. All day long she repeated to herself, "He goes down to 200 a year for this." He could give up hunting.
He was not fit to remain on the county council. She did not care about the car. She felt she did not really care about anything now. But Johnny should pay for it. Johnny should be cut down to 200 a year. That was settled. She spent the day between tears and rage. Johnny did not come back till after she was in bed. All day, while she repeated to herself Johnny's punishment, she had visualized the scene. This time she would stand no nonsense. This time she would be absolutely firm. Not angry. It was simply no use being angry with Johnny. It was no more good being angry with Johnny than with a puppy that steals a chop off the kitchen table. But puppies have to be trained, and Johnny had got to be trained too, and when puppies grow up into dogs and have lapses, they have to be punished for their own good. Lina, weeping with disappointment that Johnny had not been trained after all, realized that the only hope for him lay in her own firmness. She would not be harsh with him. She would try hard to be kind and sympathetic and understanding. She would not let her bitterness come to the surface. But Johnny must be taught that dishonesty simply does not pay. It seemed very hard to Lina that she, of all the world, must teach him. She made up the speeches, she would say, going through them over and over again until she had them completely by heart. She knew the expressions she would wear. She saw exactly the expressions on Johnny's face. Johnny would not say much. He would be penitent as usual, and probably try to blarney her. She heard him blarneying, with the exact words that he would use, but she would not be blarneyed. Gently, but very firmly, she would make him understand that he must be punished, and she would cut him down to 200 a year. Over and over again she rehearsed what she would say. When at last she heard Johnny come into his dressing room, she felt quite sick with nervousness. Her heart thumping unbearably, she lay and listened to him moving about. He seemed neither hurried nor dawdling, just normal. Then he came into the bedroom in his pyjamas. He smiled at her mischievously, quite impenitently. "Well, monkey face? Heard the grim news?" She sat up in bed, looked at him for a moment, her mouth trembling, and then burst into tears. "Oh, Johnny!" Johnny took her in his arms, and she clung to him. He kissed her repeatedly. "Poor old thing. I'm a rotter, aren't I? It's tough luck on you, monkey face, but I really was in a hell of a hole." "Oh, Johnny, how could you?" Lina knew that she would never utter a single one of her careful speeches, never cut Johnny down to 200 a year, never punish him at all. Johnny was in a hell of a hole. Lina gave him 4 of the £500 he wanted. Johnny volunteered a passionate promise never to get in a hell of a hole again. Chapter 8. Lina had been extremely disappointed that she and Johnny had no children. She had wanted a child badly. Now she began to think that perhaps it was not a bad thing that there were none. It would be terrible if Johnny's children turned out like Johnny. General McLaidlaw had been right. The Aysgarth stock was rotten. It was a pity that its rottenness had not come out in Johnny physically, instead of providing a warped mind for his sound body. Johnny, of course, was very quiet for a week or two after the episode of the cheque, grateful for his £400 and most attentive to Lina. Then, gradually, Lina could see it happening. The money became a right instead of a favour, and Johnny rapidly began to forget that he had ever made an attempt, and a very childish attempt, at forgery. Lina wondered desperately whether she had marred forever when she might have made him, or whether her weakness had really been wisdom in disguise. It was the childishness of Johnny's crimes that seemed to her so pathetic. If they had not been so very amateurish, she might have found the strength to be sterner with him. To the trained eye of a bank cashier, his effort at forgery must have been ludicrous. The theft of her chairs was bound to come out almost at once, for the feeble story about the American would have been torn to shreds the moment the police were called in. If he had thought for a moment, he could not have hoped to conceal his dismissal from Bradstow for more than another week or two at the most. Johnny had seemed to commit his misdemeanours in the same spirit of light-hearted irresponsibility as that in which he teased Janet over a dinner table. Lina could only hope intensely that the tale of them was now at last at an end. In any case, Johnny, who had appeared at first really to understand this time the enormity of his offence, had quite got over it by the time Frida Newsham came back from London. Frida had been up in town for a fortnight or more. Charlie Bowes had still been there. And then, when Charlie himself had to go, Archie had come up on purpose to see her. And of course, her dear, she couldn't let Archie down, could she? She meant not when Archie was as devoted to her as he notoriously was. Of course not, said Lina. So Frida had come over in her car on a nice March morning to have a really good gossip about it all. Having talked about herself for an hour by the clock, she asked after Johnny. "He's all right," said Lina. "He's taken the car over to Bournemouth to have something done to it." "What?" "Good heavens, I don't know. Don't ask me anything about cars insides. I can't bear them. I can do any running repairs myself. My dear, I don't think anyone should drive a car at all who can't." "Well, I don't drive a car," Lina said brightly. "What about a cocktail?" "My dear, I should simply love one. You make the best cocktails I know. I wish you'd teach Harry one day. He's so stupid about drinks." "Nobody should drink a cocktail who can't mix one," said Lina, and went off to give orders that there would be 2 to lunch after all. Frida would talk about Johnny at lunch. Lina did not want to discuss Johnny with Frida in the least, but Frida continually brought the conversation back to him. Lina got a little irritated, and, as always, showed it. It seemed to her that Frida spoke of Johnny in a positively proprietary way. Her jealousy of Janet, whom she was now pleased to assume to be a really close friend of Johnny's, was quite plain. She resented Lina's irritation, and responded to it with exasperation of her own. Lina, never slow to take up the tone of anyone with whom she was talking, grew exasperated too. By the end of lunch, the two were openly snapping at each other. "How absurd we are," Lina thought, as she poured out coffee in the drawing-room. "I don't like Frida, and I'm sure she doesn't like me. But why need we show it? I shouldn't take her ridiculous remarks about Johnny seriously." She began to talk, a little too brightly, on impersonal subjects, but Frida still remained curt. Then Frida glanced at her wristwatch and said, "My dear, I was quite forgetting. I've simply got to run over to Pensworthy this afternoon. Why don't you come with me?" "Pensworthy?" said Lina. It seemed an odd place for an errand. "Yes, I promised I'd go this afternoon. You've got nothing to do." "Oh, if you're going to call on people—" No. It's only to a shop. Something Harry wanted, and he says he can only get it there." "I should have thought that anything one could get in Pensworthy, one could get better in Bournemouth." "It's a particular man," Frida said vaguely. "Anyhow, I've got to go. Come with me." "Well, I don't know," Lina said weakly. There were plenty of things she would rather do than go over to Pensworthy with Frida. There was a new book from the library, for instance. But Frida was determined that she should go, so Lina took the easiest line and went. Frida seemed preoccupied on the journey. When they reached Pensworthy, she parked the car on one side of the little town's broad street and jumped out. Lina followed. "I shan't be a minute," Frida said. "Oh, look, we've stopped right outside Ella's shop. You'd like to have a word with her, wouldn't you? I'll pick you up there when I'm ready." Before Lina could answer, she had hurried off down the street. As it seemed determined for her that she should call on Ella, Lina walked to the shop which Frida had indicated. It was a shabby little affair, with a board above the small window which announced that J. Banks, provision merchant, was licensed to sell also cigarettes and tobacco. Lina opened the door, which caused a bell above it to utter a sharp ping, and passed into the rather dim interior. In answer to the ping, a young woman came leisurely out from the room behind the shop. "How are you, Ella?" said Lina graciously. "You remember me, I expect. I heard you were living here, and—" "Looks," said Ella, and rubbed her hands nervously on her dress. "It's Mrs. Aysgarth." "Yes." There seemed very little to say. Lina looked hurriedly round the shop for something to buy instead. "Yes, so you're married now, Ella?" "Yes, Mrs. Aysgarth." "I hope you're getting on well here." Lina's eyes roamed vaguely over a stack of tinned fruit to a string of onions hanging from a nail. "Yes, thank you, Mrs. Aysgarth. It's a bit of a struggle, of course, in these times, but everyone's the same nowadays, aren't they?" "Yes, things are certainly in a very bad way everywhere." Lina wondered why Ella should be so extremely nervous. She used not to be of the nervous type. "And is Mr. Aysgarth quite well?" Ella asked in a rush. "Quite, thank you." Lina, unable to decide whether it would be tactless to buy something at once and put an end to this inane conversation, racked her mind for something to say. "I hear you've got a little boy now, Ella." Ella went positively pale. Who told you that?" she stammered. "Why, Mrs. Newsham. You remember her? Is your little boy here? I should so much like to see him." "He's out." Ella discharged the words quite breathlessly. Lina received a definite impression that Ella did not wish her to see the child. "Oh, what a pity," she said, a little puzzled but indifferent. "Well, Ella, there are one or two things I want for the house, and I should like to get them here." She bought a pound's worth of assorted groceries. Ella, who seemed to have got over her nervousness, was grateful, but not unduly. Lina noticed that she kept glancing a little apprehensively towards the door. "There's something wrong here," she thought. "It looks as if the husband was a bad lot. Anyhow, it's none of my business." While Ella was doing up the package, the shop door opened and a small boy came in. He marched up to the counter behind which Ella was standing. "I've been up to Willie Brooks's, Mum," he announced. "They'm got a new calf." A ray of sunlight coming through the dusty window fell directly on his face. In one glance, Lina understood everything. Frida's hints, Ella's nervousness, everything. She got out of the shop somehow. When fate is ready for something, she piles up her effects as lavishly as ever Mr. C.B. Cochrane did. Lina had left word at home that she would not be in to tea, as she would be going on to Mrs. Newsham's. Instead, she had asked Frida, quite calmly, to excuse her as she had a headache. Frida, looking a little worried now, took her back to the front gates of Delfield. They spoke very little on the hour's journey, and neither of them referred to the subject which was bursting both their minds. Lina let herself into the house very quietly. She wanted no one to know that she had come back. She intended to go up to her room and think and think. Till now she had been unable to do that. To reach the stairs, she had to pass the drawing-room door. It was just open, and from inside came the sound of voices. Lina paused instinctively to learn who was there. There was Johnny's voice, and then there was Janet's. At first, Lina did not take in what they were saying. "Darling, of course you can stop to tea. You didn't know she was going to be out." "But it looks so bad. She's sure to hear about it." "Well, what does that matter, my little Janie? Surely I know you well enough to be able to ask you to pour out my tea." "But I'm not supposed to like you." "Oh, Johnny, it's been difficult to keep that up these last months." "My precious." There was the sound of a kiss. Of kisses. Then Johnny said, "It's all right about next Wednesday." "Yes, but—" "But what, my Janiekins?" "I'm so afraid we shall be caught one day. I know so many people in Bournemouth, and so do you." "Sweetest, it's all right so long as we don't go to the flat together. Nobody ever gets a chance of seeing us together. Honestly, it's as safe as houses. Besides, you want to come, don't you?" "Johnny, need you ask that?" "I want to hear you say it." Lina crept upstairs. That evening it all came out. By an effort of which she would not have believed herself capable, Lina sat through dinner. She could not eat more than a mouthful. To Johnny's inquiries, she said that she had a bad headache. It almost made her begin to cry again to hear him asking with such solicitude, as if he was really fond of her. She felt utterly crushed. There was no anger against Johnny or against Janet. Things were too serious for anger. All she knew was that the bottom had dropped out of life. It was the end of everything. After dinner she went up to her room again, and sat for what seemed hours in the chair by the window. She could not think. She could not plan. Her mind was numbed with misery. It was simply the end. All she had worked for, all her forbearance, all her struggles against Johnny's worse nature, had gone for just nothing. She sat on in the dark. Johnny came up and turned on the light. "Poor old monkey face. Still feeling rotten? Why don't you go to bed? Shall I bring you up a spot of whiskey or something? Might do you good." He came to her chair and made as if to embrace her. Lina shuddered away from him. "Will you sleep in your dressing-room tonight, please?" she said dully. By tomorrow she might be able to think, to decide what must be done. "Really want me to?" Johnny hated sleeping away from her, or pretended to hate it. "Yes, please." "All right," Johnny said magnanimously. Lina began to cry. "Poor old thing. Bad as all that, is it? Go to bed, sweetheart. I'll help you, shall I?" "Go away," Lina said brokenly. "Go away." "Don't you want me with you?" Johnny put his hand on her shoulder. "Don't touch me!" Lina sobbed hysterically. Johnny drew back. "What on earth's the matter with you?" Lina did not answer that. She felt for her handkerchief, could not find it, and held her hands over her eyes. The tears trickled between her fingers. "What's the matter with you?" Johnny repeated, more suspiciously and more coldly. Lina shook her head. Johnny gripped her shoulder. "What's the matter?"
"Oh, leave me alone."
"No. There's something up. Come on. What is it?"
"Something I found out. I don't want to talk about it. Please leave me alone."
"No, I won't. What have you found out?" Johnny went on, persisting.
"Oh, about you and Janet,"
Lina sobbed out at last. "Me and Janet? What on earth do you mean?" Above her head, Lina knew an expression of preternatural innocence was only admitting Johnny's guilt more plainly.
"You and Janet and the flat in Bournemouth and everything. Go away, for heaven's sake. Go away."
"I simply don't understand what you're talking about." It was Lina's own phrase, thrown back at her.
"Oh, don't go on lying,"
Lina moaned. There was a long pause. "And how do you imagine you know all this?" Johnny's voice was a little uneven, too.
"I heard you, in the drawing room, when I came in this afternoon."
"Eavesdropping, eh?" Johnny sneered.
"Oh, what do words matter? I heard you, I know."
"Oh, you do you?" Johnny's tone filed across Lina's raw nerves. For the first time she faced him directly.
"Johnny, don't you understand things are serious? I've stood your thieving and embezzling and trying to forge my name and all the rest, but this is too much. My closest friend. I didn't want to talk about it tonight, but if you make me... How long has it been going on?"
Johnny seemed to have recovered his grip. "You really want to know?" he said lightly. "Yes. All right, then. Don't blame me if you find afterwards that ignorance would have been bliss."
"Nearly a year."
"Do you love her?" "Not in the least. She's beginning to bore me stiff." There were 2 spots of colour on Johnny's cheekbones which, if she had understood them, might have warned Lina not to take everything he might say now at quite its face value. There is an impulse, when we are upbraided for something we really have done, to make ourselves out even worse than that. Lina looked at Johnny in horror.
You cad."
"What do words matter? Anyhow, my dear, what do you think you're going to do about it?"
"Do?"
Lina echoed dully. This was a Johnny she had never seen before, and never suspected, but it was all on a par.
"What do you expect me to do about it? Divorce you, of course."
"Ah, yes," Johnny sneered. "And where's your evidence?"
"In Bournemouth."
"Going to make a personal tour of all the flats in Bournemouth? You'll have a job, you know. I'm not a complete fool. We've covered up our tracks pretty well. The house agent never even saw me." Johnny actually laughed with a kind of horrid triumph. "You'll have a hell of a job, my dear."
"Don't call me your dear."
"Purely conventional?" Lina began to tremble again. Rage snatched her back from the edge of tears. The Janet affair she might possibly have forgiven, had her forgiveness been implored, but that other one, never, that supreme humiliation. She jumped to her feet, breathing so hard that she could hardly speak.
"I saw Ella's little boy today, too. My own servant, in my own house, the very first year."
"Oh?" said Johnny calmly. "So you know about that, too?"
"I didn't think even you could be so horrible. I feel absolutely filthy myself, ever having had anything to do with—"
"Well," Johnny said slowly, "if we're going to exchange compliments, you're not really so clean in any case, are you?"
"What do you mean?"
Johnny laughed. "Do you think I didn't realize what was going on between you and that tow-headed young would-be author? Not that I minded in the least, But fair's fair, so don't be a hypocrite, my dear." Lina gasped. "Johnny, you cad!" "Oh, deny it if you like." Johnny shrugged his shoulders. "But do you think I don't know how any woman of 35 will fall for any young man who tells her she doesn't look as old as she does? It used to make me laugh to hear him laying on the butter, but as I say, I didn't mind. Good luck to both of us, I thought." Lina was beside herself with rage. "No," she said shrilly. "Even if it had been true, I don't suppose you would have minded, so long as you could go on getting money out of me." "Of course," Johnny said evenly, though the spots of colour on his cheeks deepened and spread a little. "Of course. What do you think I married you for?" "Oh, so it's come to that, has it?" Johnny pushed his hands a little deeper into his pockets and grinned at her cruelly. "Yes. I think it's about time you had a few home truths too, as we're going in for home truths this evening, apparently, and after all, I'm getting a bit sick of smarming to you for your damned money that you're so mean with. I'm afraid, my dear, I never really cared two straws about you. After all, I do like my women to be pretty, but I took you in all right, didn't I? Good Lord, your people knew well enough what I was after, but you were so conceited you never guessed. Really, my dear girl, what use do you think a woman like you would have been to a man like me without your money? I believe you're under the impression that you've been what they call a good wife to me. Well, all I can say is I'd sooner have a wet fish in my bed. Look what you were like on our honeymoon. Spoilt the whole thing. If you can forget all that, I can't. I promise you, if I've played about a bit, you've driven me to it. Yes, it's about time you did know the truth. And if you know so much, it won't do any harm for you to know a bit more. Did you know, for instance, that Frida Newsham and I—" "You devil! Get out of my room! I won't listen! I won't listen!" Lina threw herself face downwards on the bed and stopped her ears with her fists. But Johnny, standing over her, went on with his recital, and she did listen. Johnny was pulling the wings off the fly at last. He flayed her with names, sacrificing his mistresses to make a knout for his wife. Lina heard them through a fog of horror. Mary Bernard, Olive Redmire, Edith Bruff, girls from the village, any pretty woman Johnny took a fancy to, even Clara Fortnum herself. "And now," concluded Johnny loudly, "you can do what you damn well like about it, and to hell with you and your blasted money." He flung out of the room. Part 2, Chapter 9. "My dear girl," Joyce repeated patiently, "take a lover." She said it as one might say, take a dose of castor oil. "But I don't want a lover," said Lina for the 10th time. "Then divorce Johnny." "He said I couldn't. I haven't got any evidence." "You haven't tried to get any. A good private detective could get it for you in no time." "I hate the idea of a detective nosing into my affairs. I don't think I could bear it." "Do you want to divorce Johnny, or do you not?" "Oh, I suppose so. I could never live with him again, of course. Never. Besides, he doesn't want me." "He'll want you quick enough when funds begin to run low." "Oh, Joyce," said Lina weakly, and began to cry once more. Joyce regarded her tears for a moment with a sisterly eye. Then she repeated her panacea. "My dear Lina, what you need is a lover." They were sitting in the drawing-room of Joyce's house in Hamilton Terrace. Lina had not seen Johnny since he had flung himself out of her bedroom and out of the house on that terrible evening a week ago, after saying things that could never be forgotten or forgiven. She had left for London the next morning, after a frenzied telegram to Joyce, left Johnny forever, left Delfield, left Up Cottery with its treacherous Janet and its treacherous, malice-driven Frida, never to see any of them again, just thrown a few things into a small case and scuttled. It had been a miserable week. No word had come from Johnny. "He's biding his time," said Joyce. Joyce was very outspoken about Johnny, not bitter, just practical. Lina had been more loyal than she need have been. She had not uttered a word about Johnny's dishonesty, only about his unfaithfulness. But there was plenty for Joyce to be outspoken about without that. "What you don't allow for, Lina, is that Johnny knows women. It's about all he does know, but for women and horses he's got to have full marks. He's led you all this time by the nose. He always knew what you were going to do, and you always did it. He knew how to get anything he wanted out of you, and he always got it. He's always been one move ahead of you, and you've always worked to plan, his plan. Now it's up to you." "How?" "By not doing what he counts on your doing. My dear girl, you've got to face the fact that Johnny's a complete rotter. No man who was worth a damn would be content to be kept by his wife as you've kept Johnny. No man who wasn't a complete rotter would keep mistresses on his wife's money. It's easy enough to see what's in Johnny's mind. He knows you're weak. He's giving you a month or two, and then he expects you to come crawling back to his feet, saying he can keep as many mistresses as he likes on your money, if only he'll keep you too." "I wouldn't say anything of the kind," "Not so bluntly. But he expects that you'll turn a blind eye. I'm certain he does. If Johnny knows women, I know Johnny. He thinks he's got you just there. He'll soon find out he hasn't got anything of the sort. Then for heaven's sake, let him. It's simple madness of you to keep on his allowance and keep Delfield going for his benefit. Shut the place up. Cut him down to nothing and file your petition at once. Do show a little backbone, Lina. It's now or never. Johnny's not the faintest use to you, and you'll soon get over the loss of him. If you're weak now, he'll be a plague to you for the rest of your life. You'll never be happy, tied to that rotter. For goodness sake, don't be so spineless." Joyce was very convincing. "Perhaps I'm not so spineless as you think," Lina would retort. She knew Joyce was right. There was no hesitation about divorcing Johnny. Lina had been determined on that from the first. But she pretended to Joyce to be not so determined as she really was, because she wanted her conviction strengthened. She had spent a great part of the first week in tears, but they had been tears of anger and bruised vanity rather than tears of weakness, though she had not let Joyce altogether realize that. She liked Joyce to think her weaker than she was, because she wanted to depend on Joyce. And Joyce was so extremely dependable. Also she wanted to be comforted and cosseted and bullied into doing what she had already made up her mind must be done. No, there never had been any question about not divorcing Johnny. The only trouble was the first step. Lina always hated first steps. So by playing up her weakness, she got Joyce to take the first steps for her. It was Joyce who wrote dismissing the Delfield servants with a month's wages. It was Joyce who went down and shut the house up. She did not see Johnny. Johnny, she learned, had left Delfield too and gone to live in Bournemouth. She obtained his address and came back with it. It was Joyce who sent a private detective to Bournemouth to obtain the necessary evidence. Only one thing Lina would not do, and that was to stop Johnny's allowance. On that point she was quite obstinate. "Don't you see," she said to Joyce, "if it were the other way round and Johnny was divorcing me, he'd have to maintain me till the decree was made absolute. I'd be his wife till then. Well, Johnny's my husband till then. He can have his alimony." Joyce could not but applaud the cynicism while deploring the wasted money it would cost. Cecil was very kind to Lina in his gentle way. He took her to a strange play produced by the Stage Society, of which Lina could not make head nor tail, and which bored her exceedingly, though she told Cecil it was extremely clever. He took her and Joyce to a cocktail party given by an extremely famous novelist, mostly to other extremely famous novelists, who frightened Lina very much before she got there, and disappointed her still more when she did. Everyone asked Lina what she did, and she had to confess to the humiliation of being the only person in the room who did nothing. Then they told her what they did. "But how quite too marvellous," said a willowy young man, all spots and spats, and lifted his head to waft a yawn over hers. Then he caught sight of a friend, and his glazing eye brightened. "What, you here, Frank? How too utterly marvellous. You know, Mrs. don't you?" The willowy young man escaped, and Lina found herself being addressed by a short, stocky, prematurely bald young man, who dipped his head before speaking, like a chicken about to drink. "Chip, chip, 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 chip," he observed, or as near to that as Lina could gather, in the gentlest possible voice. "Don't you think so?" he added, suddenly and clearly, on a rising inflection. "Oh," said Lina, "I do." As usual, when nervous, she had thrown too much enthusiasm into her voice. The stocky young man, who thought he had only remarked that it was getting a little hot in here, looked at her in mild alarm. "Chip, chip, 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 chip," he said, with a dart of his head towards the other side of the room, and edged away with an uncertain smile. Lina, feeling utterly provincial, followed his progress towards a strange young woman in crimson silk, with a black pork-pie hat and a white satin muff. The stocky young man seemed far more at home with her than with Lina. "Why do people find me alarming?" she thought despairingly, "when I'm simply terrified to death of them myself?" Cecil also took her, on her own request, to the National Gallery. Translating into ideas about painting the bias which made him approve of the dull, expressionistic nonsense beloved of the Stage Society, he explained to her quite vehemently why none of the pictures should be there at all. Lina was surprised to find that her brother-in-law should hold such strong opinions about anything. That they should be so mistaken did not surprise her in the least. But Joyce took her for a day's outrageously extravagant shopping, and after it to dinner at the Ivy and to Bow-Bells, and Lina laughed for the first time since she left home. The first fortnight she spent in Hamilton Terrace was the most wretched time that Lina had ever experienced. She felt that life had been exploded for her like a toy balloon, and there was simply nothing left. At times she thought, quite seriously, of suicide as the simplest way out, simpler somehow than divorce. Luckily, however, Bow-Bells and her new frocks saved her from that. Joyce plainly mistrusted her. She was too sensible to overstate her case against Johnny, but she continued to sound Lina subtly in order to make sure that she was not weakening. Lina did not weaken. "Oh, yes, I know it's impossible. That sort of thing can't go on. I mean to divorce him." Joyce nodded sympathetically, satisfied. "But the awful thing is that I still love him," Lina added mournfully. "He's my child." Joyce snorted. "Lina, don't be so flatulent." Lina met Ronald Kirby at a studio party in Kensington. It was not the sort of party that Joyce would have dreamed of going to on her own account. Since Cecil had made his name, Joyce had become very particular about the parties she let him attend. A mixed gathering of artists and second-rate writers would not have been considered for a moment. Lina had not at all wanted to go. It was to be a silly party, with all the guests dressed as children, and Lina thought that, in her circumstances, it would be too dreadful. But Joyce had insisted. It would be good for her. It would take her out of herself. Besides, it might even be amusing. So Lina, too dispirited to resist, had allowed herself to be persuaded into an abbreviated red and white check frock and tied a large bow in her hair and felt rather ridiculous. Even the sight of Cecil, melancholy in black velvet knickers and a Lord Fauntleroy collar, but prepared to suffer so much for her sake, failed to cheer her. Joyce, of course, looked quite charming and about 19 in rose-pink taffeta. There was a great deal to drink, and it was not long before Lina began to feel guiltily glad that they had come. She recognized, with surprise, that though they ought to be doing nothing of the sort, her spirits were beginning to rise. She began to forget for quite long intervals that she was a betrayed wife and a bruised soul, and remembered only that this impossible party actually was rather amusing. She knew she was drinking too much, but that was deliberate, a gesture of contempt and defiance towards the profligate Johnny. She toyed with the idea of getting quite drunk and being disgraced. As Joyce had said, the party comprised a mixed lot. Mixed parties are not usually successful, but this one was. They all seemed to know each other, and everyone was cheerful. Except for Cecil, no one was in the first class, and so had no dignity to keep up. The host designed posters, and his wife wrote serials for the newspapers. Lina felt proud of being the sister-in-law of the most distinguished man in the room. First they stood about in groups and talked. Then there was dancing, and after that they played nursery games. It really was rather fun. Somewhat jovial versions of Hunt the Slipper, Oranges and Lemons, and Blind Man's Buff were performed. And then someone suggested hide and seek in the dark. The suggestion appeared popular. The host shepherded the men into another room, and all the women put one of their shoes in the middle of the floor. Then each man appeared in turn and chose a slipper, whose owner was to be his partner for hiding. Lina felt quite excited as she watched a tall, dark man who had not yet been introduced to her pick out her slipper. "That's mine," she whispered to Joyce. "Who is he?" "Ronald Kirby," Joyce whispered back. "Black and white artist. I've met him. Quite nice, but enthusiastic." Lina knew his work. He drew funny little men in absurd plights for Punch and other humorous papers. Joyce just had time to introduce them before she too was claimed. Kirby looked at Lina with a smile which she instantly thought one of the most attractive she had ever seen. A real smile that embraced his grey-green eyes just as much as his rather pronounced but sensitive mouth. "I say," he said confidentially, "I believe I know a really good place, but it's rather a scramble to get there. Are you game to try it?" "Yes, let's," said Lina at once. They stood together for a moment, while the last men drew their partners, and then all the lights were put out. Kirby took Lina's hand and drew her confidently into the darkness. She felt pleasingly excited. Kirby led her up the stairs that rose from one end of the studio. Bodies bumped into them and were bumped by them. The air was full of hissing whispers. Cigarettes glowed here and there. It was exhilaratingly mysterious. The really good place proved to be actually in a neighbouring roof. They had to climb out of an upstairs window and cross a few feet of leads, and there was a little door into a gabled roof. "Isn't it rather dirty?" suggested Lina, peering into the blackness inside. "No, there's a mattress to sit on, and I brought these." He showed 2 or 3 cushions which he had caught up as they passed through the studio. "I know this cubbyhole. It's the private resort of our host, but we'll have to talk in whispers because it's over someone else's rooms. Or would you rather go back?" "Of course I wouldn't. It's most exciting." Kirby struck a match, and Lina saw the mattress stretched across the rafters. She sat down, and there was room for her feet where the level swept down to the door. Kirby closed the door and sat down beside her. Lina's heart began to beat rather more quickly, though she did not quite know why. It was an adventure, in a way, sitting there in the darkness beside a strange young man. "And what will you do if our host comes and demands his private resort?" she giggled, her glass clutched in her hand. "I've latched the door on the inside," Kirby whispered simply. "Oh." They sat for a moment in silence. "You know, Mrs. Aysgarth, I chose your slipper on purpose." "Did you?" Lina was conscious of a little flutter. "Yes, I knew that old game. So as soon as hide-and-seek was suggested, I had a good look at your shoes." "Really?" Lina was too unsophisticated to hide her pleasure. "Why?" "I thought you looked so nice." Lina did not answer. She was not used to compliments, especially on her looks, and generally they embarrassed her. She felt them to be insincere. But this one had been so simply spoken that she believed it. He really had thought she looked nice. It was balm to her after Johnny's brutal words. She put her glass down beside her, clasped her hands round her knees, and leaned gratefully against her companion. The movement was instinctive. Her usual self-consciousness, which scrutinized every action before she made it, had been dispelled by the drink she had taken. "What did you think when you saw who'd chosen it? Were you disappointed?" Lina knew nothing about the art of flirting. "No," she said clearly. "I was glad." "You darling." The next instant, Kirby's arm was round her. He had taken her chin in his hand and was kissing her mouth. It was so sudden that Lina was taken completely by surprise. She had expected, perhaps, a little verbal sparring, possibly even a tentative hand on her waist, which she would instantly shake off, but nothing more. Kirby's kisses astonished her. They astonished her out of her senses, for the next thing that Lina realized was that she was returning them more fiercely than they were being bestowed on her. "You sweet thing," Kirby muttered, holding her so closely to him that the thumping of his heart against her breast was almost the first thing that reached her returning consciousness. She tore herself away from him. I'm not, she cried distractedly. What in heaven's name had happened to her? Had she suddenly gone quite mad? Johnny was standing now like a spectre at her elbow. "Hush!" Masterfully, Kirby put his arm round her again and drew her to him. She resisted half-heartedly, and that only for a moment. She wanted to be kissed again, wanted it desperately. He did kiss her, gently. "Do you know," Lina heard herself saying in a strangely detached voice, "that was the first time I've let anyone kiss me since I was married." "Is it?" Kirby's voice was caressing, but it had no conviction. Quite obviously, he did not believe her. And how could he, when she had just kissed him like that? "Yes," she said flatly, and realized with impotent annoyance that she was beginning to cry. At first, Kirby did not notice her tears. Lina lay limp against him as she concentrated on trying to check the telltale sobs and heavings. Then her wet cheek, as he brushed it with his, gave her away. "I say, you're crying." His voice was dismayed. Lina shook her head violently. "No, I'm not." She tried to force a laugh. "But you are. Your cheeks are wet." He felt them gingerly with the tips of his fingers. I'm not. She gave way and collapsed on his shoulder, her body shaking with sobs. In its usual annoying way, alcohol had ceased to exhilarate and become depressing. Lina had told Kirby everything. Encouraged by his kindness, she had poured out all Johnny's unfaithfulness, at first interspersed with tears, and then indignantly. Kirby was very sympathetic. His understanding surprised Lina. Complete stranger though he was, she felt that he was the first person who had adequately grasped what she was suffering. His condemnation of Johnny was no less indignant than her own, although only this one side of Johnny's rascality had been imparted to him. "It's a damned shame," he kept repeating. "A really nice person like you. God knows, there are few enough nice women in the world. He must be a plain idiot, your husband. Hurry up and divorce him, and find someone who'll appreciate you. It's a damned shame." "But you don't know me," Lina had to protest. "I may not be at all nice, really." "You're a darling," Kirby declared, and sounded as if in his opinion there could be no possible doubt about that. Lina felt immensely soothed. Kirby kissed her and stroked her hair, and went on telling her how nice she was, and how he had been attracted to her all the evening, from the very first moment of seeing her, and how impatiently he had been waiting for hide-and-seek so that he could choose her slipper, and how much nicer she was now he knew her than he had even imagined before, and what a damn shame it all was. Lina found it most heartening to believe him. After all, she was quite nice, and it was a damn shame. Then she discovered that they had been sitting up there for an hour and 20 minutes. "An hour and 20 minutes," she repeated, horrified. "We must go down at once." "There's no hurry, dear." "Indeed there is. An hour and 20 minutes, really. What on earth will they be thinking?" "What does it matter what they think? You hardly know anyone here, and your sister certainly won't mind. As a matter of fact, I don't suppose we've been missed at all." The nervous exasperation seized her which opposition always provoked. "Don't be so absurd. Of course we've been missed. We must go down at once. Please open the door." Nerves made her voice sharper than she intended or realized. "Oh, certainly, if you're so anxious to go." Kirby spoke stiffly, obviously hurt. He opened the door. "Oh dear, now I've annoyed him," Lina thought. What was it that made her use that tone when she didn't really mean it? She must stop herself. But why couldn't he see that she didn't mean it? Why must all men behave just like children? She was very contrite, because she ought to have realized by this time that men do behave like children, and are just as easily hurt. On the leads, she caught his arm. "I'm sorry I spoke like that. It was horrid of me. You've been so sweet to me. Thank you, Ronald. But we must go down, really." She held up her face to him, wondering at herself as she did so. Was this really she, offering her kiss to a man she had not known for a couple of hours? but the gesture had seemed completely natural. Kirby's irritation, responsive as it had been to her own, was soothed at once. Lina hurried down the passage and into the bedroom where the women had left their things to repair her face. The sight of her childish frock in the mirror quite startled her. It seemed so ludicrously incongruous with her recent emotions. But that's how things are, she reflected, as she refixed the bow in her hair with rather unsteady hands. The comic mask so often has a tragic face underneath it. Where would the films be if it hadn't? Nobody seemed to have missed her and Kirby. Lina's self-consciousness, as she came down the stairs with the feeling that 100 eyes were glued on her, was quite unnecessary. Only Joyce caught her eye as she swung past in the arms of her partner, and drooped her own eyelid in knowing salute. They were dancing in the studio now, and Kirby was waiting for her at the foot of the stairs. He took her without a word and guided her onto the floor. "You shouldn't," she smiled as she moved into his arms. "Let me dance with someone else first." He looked down into her eyes. "Do you think now I've found you, I'm going to let you go?" A thrill raced through Lina from head to foot. For perhaps the first moment since she had met Kirby, Johnny was completely forgotten. "And how did you get on with Ronald Kirby?" Joyce asked, when they got home in the not-so-small hours of the morning. "I liked him." "I thought you did," Joyce said comfortably. She asked no more. Chapter 10. The next morning, Joyce gave Lina more information about Ronald Kirby. She passed it over very casually, as if it were really of no importance at all. "I don't know him well, of course. He's not in our lot, but I like what I do know of him. He's one of the few in that feeble artistic crowd who seemed really solid. He's never taken over anyone else's wife or handed one of his own on to another man, and for an artist he's intelligent." "Aren't artists intelligent?" Lina asked innocently. "Of course they're not. Most of them haven't got the brains of a mouse. They just have this odd knack of being able to put things on canvas, and that's all. They're the dullest of all the creators. Musicians are the nicest. You never hear a creative musician talk about himself at all. Then the really good authors. They don't thrust their work down one's throat. They've no need to. Then the second-rate authors, who do and have. And then the painters a long way bottom." "Oh," said Lina. "But Kirby has got brains. He might have a future, too. He's beginning to make quite a name with his portraits now. That's what he's really interested in, of course. His black-and-white stuff is only pot-boiling." "I didn't know he went in for serious painting at all. He never told me." "That's just what I mean," Joyce said. "Well, he does. He paints nothing but women's portraits, and more unflatteringly than anyone else. He really is clever. He can show up his sitters more cruelly on a bit of canvas than Cecil could in a 20-page description. Cigarette?" "No, thank you." "Oh, of course. I never can remember you don't smoke." "But does he ever get any commissions, then?" Lina wondered. Joyce laughed. "My dear, you really are refreshing. They love it." At tea-time, Kirby rang Lina up and asked her to dine with him that evening. She refused at first, and then accepted. "Where shall I meet you?" "Well, what sort of place do you like?" Kirby asked. "I don't mind a bit." "A nice place, full of chattering women, with little pink lamps on the tables?" "I don't mind, really." "Where do you usually go?" "I shall plump for a grill room, if you leave it to me." "I do," Lina laughed.
So, which grill room? They arranged to meet at the Monaco at 7. Lina was 10 minutes late. Kirby jumped up from his chair in the vestibule. "Hello. I was just getting quite certain that you'd been run over on the way." "I am so sorry," Lina said, penitently. "My bus got held up at every crossroads on the way." "Oh," said Kirby. "You came by bus?" "Yes." Lina noticed that he looked a little surprised. She knew why, and blushed faintly. His voice had held the same note as Joyce's did when Lina mentioned buses to her. Joyce never went in buses. Lina, who had not got the taxi mind, always did. "Well, let's go and have a cocktail," Kirby said magnanimously. They went into the lounge. Lina was not sure that she wanted anything to drink at all after last night. What did Ronald think would be best for her? Ronald prescribed sidecars. "Well, you extraordinarily nice person," he smiled at her as soon as the waiter had gone. "How are you?" "I felt a little morning afterish this morning, but I'm better now," Lina smiled back, rather nervously. She felt a little nervous. Ronald Kirby, in a correct blue suit, might be the same inside it as Ronald Kirby dressed as a sailor boy, but the atmosphere which it produced was not. Lina had difficulty in believing that she had wept on this man's shoulder last night, and kissed him as eagerly as he had kissed her. It had been an hour's natural madness, snatched out of the drab sanity of everyday life. What was he going to do about it? What was she going to do about it? She felt too unsophisticated, too provincial, too self-conscious. If he felt self-conscious too, their dinner was bound to be a failure. Ronald, however, very evidently felt nothing of the sort. He began to chatter at once about the party and the people who had been at it, about other parties, about anything rather than Lina and her affairs. After a few minutes, Lina realized that he had perceived her lack of ease, guessed its cause, and was engaged in remedying it. She smiled at him gratefully. He really was a most understanding person. Ronald's tact and 2 sidecars restored her confidence. By the time he rose to lead the way to the grill room, Lina knew that she was going to enjoy her evening enormously. When he asked her after the oysters what she would eat next, she chose a fillet steak, very underdone. "I'm so hungry," she explained. Ronald was delighted. A woman who chooses an underdone steak in a restaurant when she might have foie de volaille en brochette must be sound at heart, he told her. Gradually, their intimacy returned. Ronald, as if to show that he was not going to take advantage of any confidences which Lina might now regret having made, did not refer at all to Johnny. Their conversation roamed over a large field. They discovered that they both liked travelling, René Clair's films, looking at cathedrals, chop suey, and the novels of Mr. P.G. Wodehouse. Ronald told the inside story of a recent murder of an artist's model, and Lina told him how to cook little plums in red wine. She tried to make him talk about his own work, but on that topic only he was shy. "I live among people who are always yapping about their work," he explained, "and I pray the good gods that I shall never get like them. It may be pharisaical, but it's a good deal less boring for one's friends." "But I shouldn't be bored. I want to hear about your work." "I expect when I know you better, I shall bore you with it, all right," Ronald assured her. "So you're going to know me better, are you?" said Lina, quite archly. The conversation took a different turn. It appeared that Ronald was going to know her very much better. He had decided that almost before they had gone off to hide last night, and now— "Yes?" said Lina, provocatively. "Now," said Ronald with a rush, "I know you're the nicest woman I've ever met in my life." "Nonsense," Lina said, but the words had made her heart give an odd little jump. "It isn't nonsense," Ronald declared fervently. "I tell you I know. You're just exactly what I've always thought a woman ought to be, and no woman ever has been." Lina tried to keep her head. "It's sweet of you to say so, Ronald, but after all, you don't know me, do you? You really don't know the first thing about me." "If you're trying to persuade me that you're not the sweetest woman in London at this moment—" Lina laughed sceptically, but an insane wish flashed through her mind that Johnny could be there to hear. She put her elbows on the table and leaned her chin on her interlaced fingers. "And what exactly have you always thought a woman ought to be, my poor Ronald?" Ronald was not in the least nonplussed. He promptly rattled out a string of adjectives embracing, Lina thought, all the possible varieties of feminine perfection. "Well, I'm afraid I'm hardly any of those," she laughed. "I'll tell you what I am. You might as well know now as later. Irritable, conceited, intolerant, bad-tempered." "You're not conceited," Ronald interposed hotly. "I never saw a less conceited woman. Weak, lazy, very lazy, provincial, unpunctual. You saw for yourself. That wasn't your fault. Your bus was held up. I ought to have come by taxi. Parsimonious, too, you see. Well, anyhow, I don't come very near that catalogue of yours." Ronald smiled at her. "I think you're perfect." Lina laughed with happiness. Ronald was absurd, of course, but it was delicious to be discussed like this. There was no getting away from it. Johnny never had appreciated her. "And everything about you is perfect," Ronald added. "Except one. Your hat." "My hat?" Lina knew only too well that hats were her weak point, but she had been sure that this was a success. She had bought it with Joyce last week, and Joyce, whose hats were certainly not a weak point, had very much approved. It was a little black Glengarry, worn very much on one side. Lina had secretly thought that she looked quite dashing in it. "What's the matter with my hat?" "It needs a feather over your left ear." "My poor boy, don't you know feathers have gone out?" "I don't care. It needs it. Besides, you'd look adorable with a naughty little feather over your left ear, Lina." "Ronald, really? Anyone would think you were talking to a young girl of 17 instead of a matron of 36. "Are you really 36, Lina? My goodness, you don't look it." "Well, I am. How old are you?" 33. Lina sighed. It was a pity that any man in whom she was interested must always be younger than herself. Ronald took her back to Hamilton Terrace in a taxi. As soon as the more brilliant lights were left behind, he put his arm round her and kissed her. "I've never been kissed in a taxi before," Lina said conversationally. "Isn't it supposed to be terribly vulgar?" "That depends who's doing it," said Ronald, kissing her again. "Well, certainly I don't feel vulgar," Lina remarked, rather wonderingly. Ronald would not come in for a drink. Joyce was reading in the drawing-room. She looked up from her book. "You're back early." "We sat on till the waiters nearly threw us out." Lina stood abstractedly in the middle of the room, pulling off her gloves. Joyce? Yes. Can you come down to Marshall's with me tomorrow morning? Yes, I think so. What for? I want to get a feather for this hat. My dear girl, feathers have gone out. I can't help that. It needs one. But nobody's wearing them now. It needs one, Lina said firmly. Over the left ear. And what's more, I shall look adorable in it, she added, but not aloud. Of course, Lina visualized herself as Ronald's mistress. She spent most of that same night in doing so. Here was the lover that Joyce had been counselling her so earnestly to take, for the raising of her little finger. She saw herself in his arms, under his kisses, in bed with him. The result both surprised and horrified her. That he attracted her strongly, and that he was the only man besides Johnny who had ever attracted her physically, she knew already. What she had not realized before was that she actively desired him. To desire a man whom one has known only for a bare 24 hours. In spite of life with Johnny, Lina was still old-fashioned enough to find that disturbing. She wondered whether Johnny's moral example had coarsened her. Lying alone in bed, with no man to touch by her side, she felt it rather depraved that she should want to have one there, and a man, at that, whom she had known such a preposterously short time, whom, in fact, she did not know at all, and when, too, she certainly did not love him. And Johnny had called her a wet fish? Not that she loved Johnny any more. She hated Johnny now, hated him bitterly and angrily and revengefully. He might have been her child once, but he had been a monster child who had turned matricide. No, Johnny would not stand in the way of her taking Ronald as a lover if she decided to do so in the end. She would not do so yet, of course. Ronald, who had such a delightfully high opinion of her, must never think that she was to be won too easily. It had been drilled into Lina from her early teens that no man thinks anything of a woman whom he can win easily. Somehow she had paid no attention to that admirable precept before she became engaged to Johnny, and look at the result. She lay on her back, staring up at the ceiling, and worrying over whether she would ever take Ronald for a lover or not. Her thoughts turned to Janet, who had had the same problem to decide, and had decided it. She felt no bitterness against Janet. The bitterness that might have been felt against Janet had all been transferred to swell Johnny's total. Janet must have suffered a lot before she decided, and more still afterwards. Lina could only be sorry for her. Unlike most women, Janet was not a natural hypocrite. That was why Lina had liked her from the first. She must have found the hypocrite's role very horrible. But she had been helpless. One is helpless when one loves. Lina knew that. Janet must have hated Johnny for making her a traitress, even while she loved him. Poor Janet. She must have suffered. She could not have made Johnny a very satisfactory mistress. But Johnny... he had set out to get her, of course. Probably he had been working to do so for years. Janet really had disliked him once, and Johnny could not have borne that from a woman. It had been a challenge which he had felt bound to accept. Johnny the charmer, Johnny the irresistible, Johnny the blackguard. Yes, Johnny was the villain of Janet's piece. Lina began to cry. She always cried now when she thought of Frida, common little upstart Frida, How she must have laughed. Of Mary Bernard, whom she had hardly noticed. Of Olive Redmire, of the village girls, of her own servants. She felt somehow that she had been a pander for Johnny's horrible amours by her own blind belief in him. She felt morally fouled, as well as physically. She forced her thoughts back to Ronald. Should she become his mistress, or should she not? There was no possible need to decide that large question, at any rate for the next 2 or 3 months, but Lina invariably worried over her problems in advance. She decided this one in 2 or 3 minutes. She would become Ronald's mistress. That would be getting her own back on Johnny with a vengeance. She exulted in the idea of getting her own back on Johnny, for Johnny had not minded.